Hey everybody, Zachary Jeans here. Let's keep walking through the Bible. So today is day 124. Oh, that's good coffee. And we are in the Gospel of John. We're in chapter 18, and we are going to be looking at Jesus' arrest and his pseudo trial before the Jewish leadership of the faith there, and also get ready to see him go before Pilate. So we've gone through this section now. This is our fourth time, obviously, because it's the fourth gospel. But I don't want you to close your ears or close your eyes to what's going on here. And I don't want to close my ears or close my eyes to what's going on here just because I've seen it before. So let's ask God to open up our eyes and open up our ears. Lord, I love you. God, even though the world is stormy and there's so many pressures going left and right and up and down and all around, your word is a rock. You are a calm in the midst of a storm, any storm. You are peace where there's agitation and chaos, Lord. And Lord, your word is truth. God, please sanctify us. Make us more like you in truth, Lord. And please open up my eyes and open up my ears and my heart, everything, my mind, to understand you, to know you in this passage, and to help make you known. God, we need you. God, we need you. God, please keep these in the world, but not of the world. And God, please protect them from Satan. Protect me from the enemy. And we ask that in your holy name, Jesus. Amen. All right. So, chapter 18 of John. I do appreciate those of you who have subscribed over there on YouTube. I may be moving onto Rumble too as well. I have a channel over there, and it's really friendly to content creators. And I've been there since they opened it up. I've just kind of watched the platform mature. Rumble, it's like YouTube. But there's a lot more room for freedom of speech. I know that eventually this teaching the Bible on YouTube, these channels, mine's not very big at all. Like, there's like 32 people or 33 or something like that subscribing. But on Rumble, they'll never shut me down for teaching the Bible. But YouTube, if there are passages that they decide they don't like, my videos could get flagged, and then my channel, even though I'm not monetizing it, it can be demonetized, so that there can never be any sort of relationship there. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just mulling it over. Just pray that I'd have discernment. Appreciate it. But I really do like Rumble, and I do watch a number of people over there, and it's pretty cool. So anyway, thank you for subscribing. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for hitting the like and all that. It matters. It tells the computer, this is okay. This is good. So, chapter 18, verse 1. When Jesus had spoken these words, that's the whole big conversation with his dad, right? He went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, went there with lanterns and torches and weapons. He got a crew together and he went to go do the dark deed. The very thing which just earlier Jesus had looked over to him and said, do what you're going to go do quickly, And then Judas was entered literally by Satan. And he went and gathered a crew and he went to go arrest Jesus. And, I've often wondered, so our perception of Judas through sermons, is it who is like a disaffected loser kind of guy that, wanted bigger things for this ministry and felt betrayed by Jesus maybe, and that Jesus wasn't living up to what he thought he should be. And he's just like this guy who gives Jesus up for 30 pieces of silver, and that's not very much money really. And our perception in the church is just, we diminish him, right? Because of what he did to the Lord. And I wonder if from Judas's point of view, if he thought that this was going to be a big deal. That his position, his ideals, his hopes would be realized in joining up with the religious leadership of the time, and perhaps others who agreed with Judas were probably the ones that joined in the crowd and yelled out, crucify him, right? So think of Judas maybe as a leader who felt betrayed by Jesus and felt like maybe he was going to be in more of a position to do something in the world. And that these chief priests and the religious leadership of the time, that they fed his desire and ego, thinking that, hey, not only am I getting paid to betray him, but I'm being fortified. I got people on my side. I got some soldiers. This is just the beginning. I wonder if he really thought that there was going to be something more. Because if he thought that, oh, hey, give me 30 pieces of silver, I'm going to go betray Jesus, and then you, the religious leadership and the whole structure of authority in Israel, is going to not only reject Jesus, but he's going to reject me. Do you think he would have done it? I don't think so. I don't think that's the way people think. I think he thought there was something more, and he didn't get it. So if you are being tempted, literally, by spiritual context, as well as circumstantial context, to betray truth and love because you think it might turn into something more, probably not. Almost always not. In the NFL, all you get is the guaranteed money in your contract. Doesn't matter how big that contract story is in the news. It says $245 million over 5 years, and you're like, oh my goodness, how could they pay somebody that much money? Well, trust me, they don't. They only pay the person what they almost always it's what the guaranteed money was. And then some of those incentives might get paid. But so Judas probably thought he had a 5-year contract for, the equivalent of leadership and opportunity, and he was going to rise up, and all these people who felt kind of betrayed by Jesus because he didn't come in and overthrow the Romans. So they screamed out, crucify him, crucify him. Judas's only guaranteed money was the 30 pieces of silver. Not only that, but it didn't really do him any good because he ended up hanging himself. Anyway, long story short, I don't think Judas thought of himself as a failure, and I don't think he thought he's going to go commit suicide, and I don't think he thought that these people were going to betray him. I think he thought that he was going to be enabled and empowered and to lead. But evil people don't like to share their authority and power. They like to use people, and they use Judas. Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" When they answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth," Jesus said to them, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. Jesus said to them, "I am he," and they drew back, and they fell to the ground. So he asked them again, "Whom do you seek?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you seek me, let these men go." I think they thought that Jesus was going to pull on Elijah and call down fire. I think that they were like, holy crap, this guy fed 5,000 people. He's been pretty cool and nice thus far, but we know the prophets of the past and the angels, the stories, and if he can feed the 5,000 and walk on water and do all this stuff and raise people from the dead, he can surely call down all hell fire. Well, not hellfire, it'd be heaven fire on them, right? So Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it, and he struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. And the servant's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me?" Man, it's hard to explain when we have to walk a road that doesn't make sense to other people. Logically speaking, it made sense to Judas to betray Jesus, for his ideas about the world and how everything should be and how it was going, and it wasn't going that way. So he was like, "I'm going to make it better. I'm going to do the thing that I think we should do." And he betrays Jesus. And then Peter decides that he's going to take the swords, which the Lord said, "Hey, take a tunic and a money belt and make sure you got some swords with you and defend yourself and all that." And so lo and behold, here's a moment. So Peter draws his sword and strikes, and Jesus is like, And it's got to be just as baffling to Peter, right? All this whole time, Peter's been baffled because in his well-meaning heart, with all of his faith and belief and trust in Jesus, he thinks it should go a certain way, and it's not going that way. So if God is doing something in this world and making a hard road for you or for me or for a community or whatever, it's not that evil's not at work and good shouldn't fight against it and all this stuff. All those parts and pieces should work as they do, but just remember that God might be doing a bigger thing there. And in this case, Jesus is like, slow your roll. Pull up. Easy, tiger. Right? And he heals. Obviously, we know from the other Gospels, he heals the servant. So the band of soldiers and their captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. First, they led him to Annas, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. It was Caiaphas who had advised the Jews that it would be expedient that the one man should die for the people. And again, to that point about Judas and Peter thinking they're doing the thing that they think they should do, Caiaphas too, in his position of high priest, was saying what he thought should be said. But in all three cases, all of them meant their works for one thing or another, right? But God meant it for his purpose, right? God can work in and through and does everything for his glory. He's working with broken, sinful, without any of his grace, would otherwise fall into an oblivion of destructive fire and anguish. But God is upholding the universe and using it and tweaking and moving in and through it motivations of evil people and well-meaning people and everybody to accomplish that purpose. Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. Since that disciple was known to the high priest, he entered with Jesus into the court of the high priest. But Peter stood outside the door. So the other disciple who was known to the high priest went out and spoke to the servant girl who kept watch at the door and brought Peter in. The servant girl at the door said to Peter, "You are not one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I'm not." Now the servants and the officers had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing and warming themselves. Peter also was with them, standing and warming himself. Man, I love a fire. If I had a dream job, it would be to live in a place that had enough woods around where nobody would care that I had a campfire going, and I could sit by the fire and talk to people about the Lord. I would love to sit around a fire and teach the Bible and generally help people take steps forward. That's my dream job. And maybe someday in heaven I will get there. Maybe here on earth, who knows? But don't you just love a fire? And Peter and all of them loved a fire because guess what? Fire's great when it's cold. So the high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. Jesus answered him, "I've spoken openly to the world. I've always taught in the synagogue and in the temple where all the Jews come together. I've said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. They know what I said." When he had said these things, one of the officers standing by struck Jesus with his hand, saying, "Is that how you answer the high priest?" Jesus answered him, "If what I said is wrong, bear witness about the wrong. But if what I said is right, why do you strike me?" Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Now, the details we get here about that night and that trial are fascinating because none of the other gospels really record this nuance that he went to Caiaphas' father first, Annas, who himself, I believe, high priest before. Talk about, and that they knew him, this disciple. Most people believe it's John, right? Could have been someone else, but because of all these details, we assume it's John. He was there, so he's able to write this stuff down. And it's also interesting that he is making it known, like, Peter, although the leader of the early church, there were other leaders, and they had their own authority, right? John had his own authority that God gave him, his own intimate relationship with God. And And it's important to note that Peter didn't just rule the roost in the early church. There were other leaders that shared that authority. So, Peter, John writes, denied Jesus. He's going to deny him, and then obviously rooster's going to crow. But he shares how Peter wasn't even going to be allowed in unless this disciple, unnamed disciple, wink, wink, nod, nod, John, put in a word to allow him in. And it's also interesting that John wasn't afraid to be identified with Jesus, even in his trial. He wasn't, when he heard that Jesus said that, Father, I've kept them, and none of them will be lost except for the son, perdition, the one that would, betray him, Judas, John believed him. And so he's walking without bold claims, walking with Jesus all the way. And as we know, all the way to the cross. He stood there with Mary, the mother of Jesus, and some of the other women who didn't bail on Jesus at the cross. And Jesus ends up, saying, mother your son and son your mother, and John, please take care of mom. So, isn't it interesting? John isn't, and the other thing is, John wrote this gospel after all the other gospels. And probably, because of Peter's death and when he died, it's likely this gospel was written after they died. So it's also, he didn't want to spill tea, right? He wanted to gossip it. But at the same time, he needed to tell these stories to set the record straight. Just wandering around some of these concepts, right? Isn't it interesting the way that John, when he wrote it and how he wrote it, and let people know, hey, there's a little more to the story. I've been reading the other Gospels, Mark and Luke and Matthew, and I got a couple stories you probably haven't heard. Man. And John will tell us that there, aren't enough books or scrolls in the whole world to record everything that Jesus said and did. And man, wouldn't it be great to hear more stories? Thank God we got the ones we've got. Anyway. Now, Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. So they said to him, you are also not one of his disciples, are you? And he denied it, and he said, I'm not. One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, did I not see you in the garden with him? Peter again denied it, and at once a rooster crowed. Gutting. Totally gutting. John doesn't let Peter off the hook in this story. It's funny, that story had been told multiple times, obviously in the Gospels, and, and then word of mouth about it. Why? But it's always important that story ends up, that even those who valiantly were willing to raise a sword and possibly be killed in defending the Lord Jesus here on earth, right? The most valiant effort and heartfelt effort, the one whom Jesus said, on this rock I'll build my church, right? On Peter, on his faith, basically. This concept of being the one to declare you are the Son of God. You're not a prophet, or you're not just a teacher or a resurrection of somebody else. You are God in the flesh. And Jesus is like, you are the kind of faith I'm looking for, Peter. And then shortly thereafter, Peter's like, Lord, all this funny talk about you going and dying, may it never be. And then Jesus is like, get behind me, Satan. All these times, right, where bold declaration of faith and I love you, Lord. And then, some trial or tribulation. See, tribulation, there's another Christianese word, outside of the Bible. When do you ever hear the word tribulation? Probably the closest thing is a tributary. How a river breaks up down towards the end where it gets close to a body of water. But that's about the closest framing of a word I can get to tribulation. We don't use the word tribulation. A bunch of trouble, right? So whenever a bunch of trouble comes, all of a sudden Peter, wants to express what he's feeling passionately in his heart. And he's not doing it in accordance with what the Lord's been telling him. Whereas, it's interesting, John, without naming himself, did sort of do what the Lord wanted. He walked with the Lord all the way up and into the actual father of the high priest and former high priest room for the initial pre-trial. And he even got Peter in, even though Peter was acting like a fool and cutting people's ears off, right? And did him a solid. And then it shows here at the end where, lo and behold, we're recording the story of Peter denying. So what's the point? The point is, be kind to yourself. Don't deny. If you screwed it up, whatever it is, don't deny that. Don't lie to yourself. If it's whatever you've done is wrong, right? John didn't hide, none of the Gospels hid what Peter did here. So don't deny it. Don't cover it up with language, excuse yourself, and so-and-so said this to me, so I feel justified in saying that to them. And we do that all the time. I do it all the time. Boy, if I have a bad customer in driving left, whoa, talking to the Lord about it, and just mad, this and that. But I've learned I gotta let it go. Gotta admit it, stop, pray for the person, and move on. But man, if you've done wrong, the Bible doesn't hide Peter's wrong, right? But at the same time, we also get a picture of what it means to, trust the Lord in what he said and walk forward. I'll close with this, on this point about how all the Gospels seem to show the faults of people. And in particular, here we are back at Peter. If the Bible, one of the things which authenticates the veracity of the Bible, or lends itself to be trusted, is it doesn't fancify or whitewash. It doesn't cover for the authors or the main people involved. The letters and the stories here in the Gospels and throughout all of the writings continuously share the wrongs that people did, and they're not always redeemed by doing right. There's not always a redemption arc in every single story in the Bible. Even in particular, even though so I'll give you an example of Peter real quick and we'll close. So remember when Peter told the Lord, hey, you're washing my feet, you shall not do that. And he said, well, if I don't do it, you don't have any part with me, Peter. He's like, oh, well, in that case, wash my head, my hands, my feet, everything, right? You're like, no. Once you're clean, all you need is your feet washed. So we have kind of a redemption there. It's like, oh, hold on, Peter. But that whole story about get behind me, Satan, it's interesting. We don't really see a redemption arc at the end of that story. There is a sort of Jesus said that and just left it. And it took Peter a bit to get over it. It took all the disciples, every time he would rebuke them, it took them a while. So there's not always like oh, there, it's okay, it's all right. Sometimes these things sting. And in this case, this moment, when Peter denies him, we know he left and wept bitterly. He was gutted. But it was on his faith. It was on the fact that Jesus prayed for him, that even though Satan was going to sift him like wheat in this moment, he prayed for Peter, that his faith, that he would pass through. So, if you're denying Jesus in your life, in your heart, fess up. Get right. And he loves you. He loves you. He loves Peter, and he loves John. So, until next time, keep walking. God bless you. Bye-bye.